Hello and welcome to this fourth episode in my Odin plus Raylib for beginners kind of series. Let me show you how the game looked last time. So at the end of the third episode, we had this kind of thing going on. So we have a player that is this cat, which is from my game Cat and Onion that I released a week ago. And you can run around, jump, and it's constantly playing this animation. That's the whole game right now. So what we will do today, I have as usual a little outline here on the side. In general, we will add another animation and do some cleanup of the code. Because we've been just coding away, adding stuff, and maybe it's starting to get there's a lot of stuff going on in this main proc. So we'll look into that, and we'll look into adding another animation. Let's just jump into it. So what we want to do today is add another animation, because it does look a bit weird when you're running around like this, and when you stand still the cat is constantly running. This is sort of when you stop pressing the left and right arrow keys here, it's sort of a good opportunity to sort of switch into some kind of idle animation, right? So let's look into that. But what we kind of want to do first, which brings us to the first point here, is to group the run animation things into a struct. And then it says plus theory about structs. So what I mean by this is that if we look here in the code, this is exactly how the code looked at the end of the third episode, except for this line that I added just to set my window at a certain position. Ignore that. But this is how the code looked at the end of the third episode. And we see that we have all these playerrun underscore things here, right? And they are used down here to sort of update and draw the animation. So we will in a bit add sort of an idle animation, which for when the cat is standing still. But before we do that, we should maybe have some kind of concept of what an animation is, like a kind of group together the data for the animation. So the way I'm gonna do that is by just before the main proc here, we will add what's called a new struct. So we will type like this: animation : struct, and then some curly braces. So this is the first time we make our own struct in this program, but we have actually used structs once before. Down here we said player source : equals rl.rectangle, and we also made this draw player dest rectangle. And if we look in Raylib, I have the Raylib file already open as a separate tab here, and we look for rectangle. So inside raylib.odin we have the rectangle here, and a rectangle is a struct that has 4 fields, as we call them, and it's an x, y, width, and a height, and all these are decimal numbers of type f32. So we've used them before, so this is how you create a new sort of struct object from this struct definition of a rectangle. So if we go up here, what we want is to kind of group these things, right? So that we have all the stuff related to an animation together. So what I will do, I will just take this and copy paste it into here. So I will take this and copy paste it into here. And what we can see here is that, okay, we want some kind of general idea of an animation here. We don't want we don't want it to ever mention the word run, because we will use this animation struct for both the idle and the run animation. So now we'll do something in Sublime that I recommend. You can hold Control and Alt and press the down arrow, and then you see your kind of cursor gets longer and longer, and then you can hold Shift and press the right arrow, and then your selection gets bigger and bigger, like this, and then you can press delete. So you get multiple carrots, and yeah. And so this, just like we saw in here, a struct essentially is the name of the field and then the type. So I just copied this from down here to get the names, but all this stuff on the right side here is wrong. So the type of the texture that load texture gives us, we can look at load texture inside raylib.odin, is texture 2D. So what we need to type here then is that the type of texture is rl.texture2D, and then we need to put a comma, and then I hold shift, press end button and select all that and delete it, because yeah, I just wanted to write a type here instead. And then it's the same thing here. We need a type here. The type of num frames will be an integer, so we will type that. And this one is actually already correct, because if when we look down here, this one was just a float 32 decimal number that we created like this. And this one also. And what you can notice here is that after each one of these, I must have a comma. So the different fields of the struct are separated by a comma. And then finally at the end, we have the frame length, which is a decimal number. So we write F32. So now we have our animation struct ready here. So what we can do now is we can, instead of having this stuff here, we can do like this. We can write player run colon equals animation like this. And you can see this is very similar to down here. Here we wrote something like this, colon equals rl.rectangle. So we can write like that, and then we need to initialize the fields of this so it is more or less does the same as this stuff here. But you know, instead of getting 5 variables, we are getting 1 variable that is a struct object that has all these fields inside it. So we can have reason about the whole run animation as one thing instead of 5 separate things. So I will just take the texture line here, paste it in, put a comma, and then you need an equals here. Like this colon here is for making new variables, but we just need the equals to set the field texture to this value here. And then we go here and we want num frames to be 4, and then we want the frame length to be 0.1. And something you can see here is that I could type like this, F32 in parentheses 0.1, but it actually doesn't matter. I can remove this. The only reason I needed it here was because it doesn't know what type I want here. It doesn't know that I want F32, but here it actually says F32 up here, so it knows that it can fit this number 0.1 into this thing, so it will be an F32. I don't need to specify it like this. And what you can also notice here is that the frame timer and the current frame, they were just created like this before. And like I've said before, everything in Odin, unless you specify a value, is 0 initialized. So you create a new variable, it's 0 initialized. And when you create a new animation like this, well, when you create a new struct like this, then the fields that you don't mention in this list here, they will all be 0 initialized. So whatever, if I left num frames out like this, then my num frames would be 0, but now it's 4. But current frame and frame timer will both be 0. So now we can remove all this stuff, because this thing expresses exactly the same thing but grouped into a single object. So now we just need to go down here and update this code, because if we would compile right now, we would get lots of compilation error, because all the variables we mentioned down here are not there anymore, because they're kind of contained inside playerrun instead. So we have this local variable here called playerrun width and height, and these need to use the you can actually do this, since I named it playerrun, and those variables used to be called playerrun underscore run underscore texture, but now it's playerrun dot texture, and that accesses the field texture inside there, right? So playerrun width is equal to this stuff, and it fetches it out of that instead. And for the rest of these things, what we can do actually here is, in Sublime there is a very nice thing called, it's similar to what I did before with having multiple carets, which means that you can have multiple selections, sort of. So what you can do in Sublime is you can select a piece of text like this, and then you can press Ctrl D. I think it's CMD D on Mac maybe. And then you press it once, and for each time you press it, it adds more to the selection. Like this. And then you can just go on until you get selected all of them. I just gotta pay attention here so I don't go too far. I think that's the last one. And now I can press, now I can just write playerrun dot instead. And you see it edited all of those at once. And then you can just click somewhere to remove all those multiple selections or press escape or something. Let's see here, is that it? Let's try compiling and see if I did any mistake. Oh yeah, so here's a problem with my multiple selection because okay, these guys actually are local variables, so I kind of did a silly there. You see this player run height here is not part of the player run struct, it's a local variable, so my multiple selection messed it up. Now if we press F7 for me to compile and run, this happens, and you see everything works like before. And this is the, you know, the usual what usually happens when you try to make things better. You first change the code a bit so it's easier to work with, make sure everything works like before, but then you can use your newly changed code to do nicer things. Right, so now we need to add, now I want to add an idle animation. And that's quite easy. I have in the description of this video, there is a link to an animation. I have already put it somewhere. So this one you will find in the description of this video, but essentially it's a file called cat_idle.png. It looks like this. It's just a 2-frame animation of a cat sort of bobbing up and down. And we will use that. So we will make a new animation by just writing player idle : animation. And then for the texture, we write texture equals rl.load texture cat idle.png. So then it loads that one instead. And as you saw in that picture, it only has 2 frames, so we write num frames equals 2. And then frame length, I think this bobbing shouldn't happen too fast. We will do frame length equals 0.5, so that means it 2 times a second it will change frame. And after this, it's good to have some kind of idea of which animation do we currently want the player to use. We can write like this: current anim : equals player run. Now we can do player idle actually. So this creates a new variable called current anim, and it sets it to this will make a new variable of the type animation, and the thing it contains is a copy of this whole thing. So it just goes into there. And now let's use the current anim instead of player run down here. I should probably have done this before, but what we can do here is, instead of writing player run.texture blah blah blah, let's use the multiple selection again, like this. Remember, it's Control D, I think, and then we can write current anim dot blah blah blah, and that should make it use the idle animation now instead. So you see now it's sort of bobbing up and down like this, but now you've lost your now it doesn't run anymore. But this is sort of what we want when you stand still, but it's not what we want when you run. So let's switch animation when you run and stand still. And the way we'll do this is, we have this thing here where we check the left key and the right key, or if no key at all is held. So inside here we will set the current animation. So current anim, so if you press the left key, then current anim will be player run. And same thing if you press the right key. So if you press the left key, it will be player run. If you press the right key, it will be player run. And if you have no key at all pressed, then current right. And if no key at all pressed, then current anim will be player idle. And we can run it again now. But now, and this is, I knew that this would happen, but we're gonna sort this out very soon. So what you see it happening here is, when you stand still, it just shows this image, and when you run, it only shows this image, right? So what is happening here is that, remember this loop here, this is our main loop, it is running constantly every frame. And for every frame that the left key is held down, it sets your velocity to this, and it sets this flip flag, which flips your player character sprite sort of. And then it changes your current animation. But this line here actually copies the whole player run animation into current animation, right? And remember, this one has this current frame field, and the current frame field of player run is 0. So each frame, even though this code down here is counting up the current frame all the time, right? It will, the code down here will use this frame timer to kind of check if it needs to switch frame, and if it needs to switch frame, it will do that. But none of that matters, since every frame you hold down the left key here, it just replaces current anim with player run, which has both the current frame and the frame timer 0. So this is a classic problem where you kind of you're missing one piece of information to do this properly. So we need to add something for it to know that it is already in the run animation, therefore it doesn't need to set it again, so that it can properly update all the stuff, all the timers and the current frame index and stuff. So that's what we need to do. And it's the same thing here. Player idle, each time you do not have any of the left or right key pressed, it sets the current animation to player idle, which copies everything in this one, everything in this struct variable, it copies into this one, which will copy the frame timer and the frame and the current frame field, which will both be 0. There are many ways to do this. One hacky way you could do it is by checking the texture. Like you could in here be like, okay, if the texture of the current animation is this one, then we like if the texture is not the run texture on the current animation, then we switch to run. But what we're gonna do instead is we're gonna add something called an enum that has a name for the current animation. So we will do like this. And this brings us to the third point here, switching between animations properly. So what we will do here is that we will add, just above the animation here, we can write animation underscore name colon enum, like that. And an enum is essentially a way to have a couple of different names that are all sort of distinct values that you can use to know that your game or program is in a specific state. So we will write here animation name is idle is the first one, and then run is the second one. That's our two animations. And then inside the animation struct, we will add name colon animation name. So now both our animations down here can have the possibility to know like which animation is this. So then we can go down here to the run animation, and we can write name equals dot, and what do we call it? Run. And the reason there's a dot here is that if you want to be very explicit, you could write animation name dot run. But since it knows that this field is of type animation name, you do not need to write the animation name thingy here. You can just write dot run. So this will make it so that this field here has this value. So we know that that one is the run one. And for this one, we write name equals dot idle. Right, so now we have a name on both those, and we can go back down here and we can write something like if current anim dot name is not equal to, this is checking if it's different from .run. Then we set it to run. So this will only happen once now. So it will check if the name of the current animation is not the run name, then it will set current animation to player run. And since player run has the name equal to run, then the frame after this happen, even though you're still holding the left key, it won't copy this stuff into this one again. And we will do the same here. If current anim.name is not .run, then we do this. And down here we need to do the reverse. If current anim.name is not equal idle, then we do like this. And there's a bunch of different ways to sort of solve these kind of problems. We could have I had 3 different ideas for how to do this. I just want to make a simple way that's easy to understand for now. So if we now press F7 to run, now we see that when you're standing still, the cat is sort of bobbing up and down slightly. Then if you press left arrow, it starts running. But then when you stop, it switches to the idle animation. And now it starts running again. So there you have it. You have 2 different animations, and it is switching between them, and it's only switching once when it's in the wrong animation, which is what this stuff here does. So that brings us to, that's sort of the new stuff we're gonna add today. What I want to do now is unmessify this code a bit here. So point 4 here is break out animation code to separate procedures plus theory about pointers. If we look down here, you see there's a lot of code here. There's both the stuff for drawing or texture, which is drawing or animation, which is this stuff, and then it's the stuff for updating the animation, which is this stuff. What I was thinking is that since we now have sort of a concept of an animation as a struct, that makes it then we can send animations into separate procedures, and maybe we can update animation in one procedure and then draw it in another. Let's start with the update one, right? So this is all the code for updating the animation. We cut Control X, and then we go up here above the main proc, and we do some new lines, and then I like just making 2 empty curly braces like this and paste my code in. And then you can hold down Shift, or you can drag select, and you can press Shift tab to move all this backward, so it's at the correct sort of indentation level here. And then I want to make a proc that contains this code. So we haven't actually in this series made any new procs before. We made the main proc, but we haven't made any utility procs to our program. So this will be the first one. So we call this one update animation, and we write : proc, and it will this one we will write a : and then we write this little thingy here called, what's it called? I'm gonna call it a pointy thingy, and then actually this curly brace here should be on this line. Now we have a proc called update animation, and it takes one parameter, which is a pointer to an animation. And I'm gonna explain what this stuff is. First, we just need to fix this code here, because it can't say current anim. It needs to say a, because that's the name of the animation, name of the variable. So I do my multi-select again. This is, I use this all the time. I think it's a very good tool to learn to use. So now all of them will go through the variable a here, and then we can go down here to where our code was, and we can write, maybe just before these player run stuff here, we can write update animation, and then we write this ampersand, and we write current anim, it's called. Okay, and if we run this, then it should still work. Yeah, so it's still updating the animation correctly. This ampersand says, please take the address of current animation. So that's why we call it a pointer. It is something that points to something else. So you take the address of current animation and you feed that into this variable. So this, whenever it does this kind of things, it actually goes and looks at A, because A just contains an address to an animation, and it checks, okay, what's your address? Okay, oh, it's that animation, it's this animation over here, and then it goes and uses that one instead. So this makes it possible for us to, from within this procedure here, directly change this one, because that's what we want. Now we have our animation update code here, so now we can also move out the drawing code, which is all this stuff, right? So let's take all this. I will copy it again, Control X. And we go up here, just below the update animation, we put in 2 new curly braces, which will be the sort of body of our new procedure. We paste all that in. I select it and I move them back by holding Shift and pressing Tab once. And then we need to give our procedure a name. So we say draw animation : proc. And then I write A : animation. And then we need to know where on the screen to draw it. So I write position rl.vector2. And then I write flip bool. These are the 3 things we need in order to draw something. So now, just like before, we need to swap out current anim here for A. Did that with the multi-selection again. A thing to notice here is that here we were intending to modify the animation. That's why we took a pointer. Here we do not take a pointer because we're only drawing. The drawing procedure, I don't intend it to ever change the animation. It's only going to take the data, the information that's in there, like what frame are we currently on, how many frames are there, what's the texture. It only takes that data and draws it on the screen, but it doesn't intend to change any of these fields. That's why we can just write like this. So then we can go down here again, and just after update animation, we write the draw animation. And then we just write current anim, so we don't need an ampersand here because we're not taking a pointer of anything. And then we need to know at which position. We write player pos, and then we need to know should it be flipped or not, which I think is called player flip. Yeah, exactly. So there are still a few issues in here, I think. Yeah, we need. It currently says player pos. I'm just gonna write pos, and then the flip is called flip now. Before was called player flip, and maybe we can rename this draw player source. We can rename to just source, and the draw player dest multi-select we can just rename to dest, like that. And then the width we can just rename to width, and the run and the player run height we just rename to height. So what you see here is that we've made this proc now, so it never mentions the word player, and we could actually use this animation struct combined with a position and maybe this flip flag to draw any animation, really. So now if we press F7 to run, everything works like before, which is, again, the intended behavior. But now we kind of generalized this animation stuff a bit here, so that we in the future can use it to draw other things, other animated things, and we also could use it to easily reason like generally about these animations here. And the code down here you see is much simpler now, so we're just running update once and draw once, and that's it. So that's sort of it for today. We've added another animation. We have talked a bit about both structs, and then we talked a bit about pointers, and then we have cleaned up the code a bit. I will see you all next time. Thanks for watching, and have a good day. Bye bye.